Hello and welcome to Americana X Newswatch Live. Coming to you straight from Hollywood, California, I'm Greg D. Today on the show, some opening remarks. Why am I making this show anyways? Then we're going to be talking about the news Mirage, Trump's Nothingburger comments about the military, and the smoke and mirrors campaign to make Trump look like he's trying to hide info about COVID from the public. And then we'll be talking about how liberals are using the American meritocratic system to create the inequality they claim to be fighting. Welcome to Newswatch Live, a news commentary show that brings a common sense perspective to our weekly news cycle. This show is for conservatives that care about what's going on behind the sensationalized headlines. If you're new here, I'd like to welcome you. If you've been here before, you know what to do. Like, comment, subscribe. Also, share this video with people out there that might be encouraged by positive, optimistic, conservative messages. This way we can continue to encourage people to think positively about the country that they live in, think positively about themselves, and look for possibilities where conservatives can make their mark on our time. All right, so this is something I wanted to start today's show with. It's just something that's been on my mind this week. I want to talk a little bit about why I'm doing this show to begin with. You know, there's a lot of pundits out there. They have different approaches to this whole thing. I think if I were to narrow down one of the things that really motivates me is this concept of connecting to like meta ideas or meta concepts where we can start to explain more what's going on. You know, there's seems like it's a really big trend to do like the normal sort of shilling or cheerleading for the conservative party, whatever it is at the time. You know, I remember this is like an example that comes to mind. There was a time when President Obama was trying to sell the Obamacare to everybody. And he said, look, if you want to keep your doctor, you know, you have a doctor you like, you can keep your doctor. I probably won't be the type of person that gets excited about like, you know, nailing him on that one. Just that's less interesting to me. What I am a little more interested in is this idea of looking at these kind of meta concepts that tie things together. So, you know, from whether I'm doing research on you know, from books I'm reading or audiobooks, or I'm looking at whatever I'm researching at the time, documentaries, other videos online. What I'm always trying to do is sort of connect the dots from between big concepts. This way, you know, I'm putting more of like a spotlight, like a broad spotlight on the framework of what's going on behind the news cycle. So yeah, I do use news stories to reach into, you know, to get to larger underlying themes. And I hope that's what I'm doing here anyways. Sometimes I may be speaking hyperbole about, you know, possible fictional future, you know, to make a very specific point. Sometimes I'll just be making speculation. Sometimes what I'll be saying is like just personal opinion based on the books and documentaries and, you know, data that I'm collecting. But ultimately, I'm looking to spot larger trends. This way, as I'm spotting these larger trends and I can convey them to you, then we can sort of make more sense of our world. And beyond all this, I think really I just have a burning desire right now to fight against the lies of the atheist secular religion that is ruining so many people's lives in America right now. And I wanted to do something about it. I wanted to do more than just consume other people's content. I wanted to get involved in the dialectic and begin to offer certain things that I'm seeing, potentially gaps where other pundits are missing. And, you know, as a result of this new sort of passion that I have and this sense of purpose, I want to use my energy to fight for freedom and liberty, as well as encouraging people to have spiritual and mental health based on healthy ideology and lifestyle. When it boils down to it, I've come to the conclusion after, many years of both. There was a time when I worked in ministry for about 7 years. I worked at a mega church. And then I've had an opportunity to work in sort of what you'd say is, I guess, a predominantly secular world in Los Angeles, where I was able to be a part of some of the machine that makes LA run. And as I've sort of worked in marketing or promotion or, graphic design or web stuff, it's given me sort of a unique opportunity to sort of pivot into the space that I'm seeing now, which is this kind of like common sense approach to talking about the stories of our day and then tie it to larger themes of just things that I'm finding interesting to research that might be explaining what's happening in the news cycle. I believe the liberal ideology is unhealthy and the conservative ideology is healthy. And so I have reluctantly decided to join the culture war. Here's a quote that I'd like to read to you. The left, quote, "The left wants power because that is their state of grace in their secular religion. They want to run people's lives, design utopia for all of us. That's what turns them on. It's the lust for power," close quote. This is a quote from A.G. Barr. I guess to put it simply, I just don't want to be ruled by people who have a lust for power and are obsessed by running other people's lives. So I'm looking to vote for and promote leaders that actually have some sort of sense of selflessness or having a basic understanding of how to put other people ahead of themselves. At least 50% of the time. Like many people, I enjoy the concept of personal liberty and autonomy and religious freedom. The left, sadly, has morphed into a power-hungry, totalitarian movement of sociopathic monsters. They will fight as dirty as they have to and will do anything by any means necessary, and they don't mind hurting people in the process as long as they get what they want in the end. Here's a few fairly transparent examples in the headlines from just the last few days I'm going to share with you here, and then I'm going to tie this to a larger concept after we go through. I'm just going to touch on these stories briefly. I call this the news mirage. It's been described as fake news and some other things, but there's like a smoke and mirrors campaign by the MSM, in essence to hurt Trump. That's really what's going on here. They'll identify something that Trump has said and they'll blow it way out of proportion. Oftentimes it's just a Nothingburger. He made some comments about the military recently, and that becomes this really big brouhaha. Ultimately, it's by the media to distract people, to get them talking about that, instead of focusing on really the very sad and shallow platform that is the Democratic liberal platform. Sure, there will always be shrieking liberals on Twitter waiting to feign outrage about every single one of these outlandish National Enquirer style stories, but more and more, this stuff just is not sticking. And that's something that I'm finding more and more. So I'd like to just talk about a couple of the stories that are in the headlines right now. The first story, Trump, Americans who died are losers and suckers. So American soldiers that died are losers and suckers. Here's a slide from the Atlantic article that I'm pulling this from. It's just so disingenuous. The president has repeatedly disparaged the intelligence of service members and asked that wounded veterans be kept out of military parades. It's just, you can read the story. It's just really biased, really ridiculous, really silly. I don't even think we really need to read the story. The title itself, if you read it, it sounds like a farce. like a Saturday Night Live skit, where a Saturday Night Live writer trying to make, fun of Donald Trump, almost like something Donald Trump might say. It reminds me of the caricature that Dana Carvey did when he was on Saturday Night Live, where he was making fun of George Bush. I don't know if you guys remember this. You may not be old enough to remember this. There was a time where, a lot of Americans, they saw most politics kind of on the same level, whether it was Democrat or Republican. They didn't take any of it too seriously. In fact, to get a lot of our hot takes or to shape our actual political opinions, we were looking to the cool pundits, so to speak, that would have come in the form of like a David Letterman late night host, that would have come in the form of Saturday Night Live. What's really funny is they were comedy, but they were shaping people's actual political opinions of their politicians. That's why for 30, 40 years, when the liberals had established a sort of hegemony in all of our entertainment, they were able to sway public opinion by entertaining people. Dana Carvey's character, I remember he was doing this impression of George Bush, and he would do this thing where he was like, 1,000 points of light, not gonna do it. He would be, what was another one he did? You got this guy over here, he's saying this right over there. Then you got this guy, he's saying something else. Not gonna do it. So that became a caricature of George Bush that we actually remember George Bush more by than what George Bush said himself. I don't know if he actually said 1,000 points of light, but it sounds like something he could have said. And that became a part of the cultural lexicon and did shape people's opinions. So yeah, I see this Atlantic article as sort of operating at that same kind of banal, vapid level of National Enquirer level news. It's really cheap. Basically, this guy, he's going to get a few clicks from some liberals and they'll shriek about it for a day or two. But it really is just cheap. Story number 2, leaked audio from Donald Trump's interview with Bob Woodward, where he says he always wanted to play it down. And I'm going to show you that here. I don't want to create a panic, said the president. Recordings from his interview with Bob Woodward. This kind of thing, it's the type of thing where it really is not news. It's really not a big deal. And yet, it's the type of thing that liberals love to get excited about. Here's a few examples. I was on Twitter and I looked up the hashtag about, I think it was called Impeach Trump Again. I think that was the hashtag. It was trending for a minute. And, just all these basic people losing their minds over this. We've got to impeach him again. This is way out of line. I remember there was a woman that had made a tweet. She said she was claiming that this was 100 times worse than Watergate. Really? It's just so brainless. She went on to make a case in a long Twitter thread, making a case for why we need to impeach Trump because he didn't want to alarm the public. Talk about brain dead liberal response. Even celebrities were getting on this, what I consider like just a brain dead response bandwagon. And here's a screenshot from an article that Fox put up. Alyssa Milano, Patton Oswalt, and more celebs call for Trump ousting after Bob Woodward interview. Arrest him! It's just this kind of stupid stuff. It's just not real news. And yet, even our moral better celebrities are jumping on bandwagons about this kind of frivolous stuff. blowing it way out of proportion. Even saw Michael Ian Black get on that bandwagon. I know he's a really strong liberal. I still think he's funny. I like him as a comedian. Just bummed to see his terrible politics. Okay, it's becoming more and more clear, I believe, to the average person now that all this stuff really is a mirage. It's just a way of kind of like putting up a facade, a front, to sort of sell a narrative or sell an idea. All smoke and mirrors. Getting to a point where it's barely worth me as a pundit or other pundits to even spend any time on this. I'm spending a few minutes on it here today, but I don't know how much longer I'm able to cover ridiculous non-stories like this. There is one thing that I am finding kind of interesting about this, though, is as we get more and more examples of the gaslighting of our president by the liberal media and by the left, and by people, I guess, general normie liberals on Twitter that create silly hashtags like impeach him again, I see more and more conservative pundits are getting used to this. And they're beginning, I'm seeing more of them begin to dig a little deeper, expose at a deeper level what is driving all of this nonsense. And it is nonsense. And in the spirit of exposing the facade, exposing the mirage, exposing the misdirection of the smoke and the mirrors, I present to you the next segment I'd like to highlight on today's show. This segment, how the liberals are using the meritocratic system in America to create inequality. And then blame corporations, rich white conservatives, for the very inequality that the liberal hegemony creates. Now, that's a pretty loaded statement right there, you know? But I believe after this segment, you're going to see how I'm making the case that this is what's going on right now. I'm going to cite one author in his book for this segment. This is, I guess, another way to title this segment. I was going to call it Notes on Where Inequality Really Comes From in America. Because, you know, we hear so much from liberals that they're so concerned about inequality. And as conservatives, they're not concerned at all about the inequality of the world because they're not compassionate. It's really the liberals that are compassionate, when really that's completely backwards. And I'm going to go through this book here, and I'm going to just identify a few of the concepts from the book. I'm going to extrapolate those out, and then I'm going to share a few ideas that I'm sort of seeing as like concepts that sort of tie this to some of this non-news that we're seeing that's constantly being spun to, I guess, sort of act as a boondoggle, get everybody like looking over here, look over here, look over here. You know, I need to look up what movie that's from. Whippoorwill, Whippoorwill, look over here, look over here. Is that Three Amigos? I don't know. Somebody put it in the comment section. Okay, so the book that we're covering here, it's called The Meritocracy Trap. It's by a guy named Daniel Markovits. This came out a few years ago, 3-4 years ago. Still very applicable to today. Tagline for the book is How America's Foundational Myth Feeds Inequality, Dismantles the Middle Class, and Devours the Elite. I mean, that's a pretty heavy title and tag for your book, you know? But to give you a little background, I mean, you can just always look up Daniel Markovits on your own and look at his Wikipedia. But this guy, he is a dude that was raised as an elite. He had a track where he had a really good childhood and put into the system of all these elite universities. And he spent his adult life in the elite universities. And now he teaches law at Yale. So I don't know if you can get more elite than that. But I will give this guy some credit, even though he is, at the end of the day, I think somewhat of a liberal shill still. He is, I got to give him credit for going at the very institution that he benefited from. This guy, he came up in this world. He now lives a really good life as a result of being in that world. And he still wrote this really bold book about exposing the meritocracy system and what it's being driven by and where it's coming from here in America. Here's a quick overview of the book, The Meritocracy Trap. It's an axiom of American life that advantage should be earned through ability and effort. Even as the country divides itself at every turn, the meritocratic ideal, that social and economic rewards should follow achievement rather than breeding, reigns supreme. Both Democrats and Republicans insistently repeat meritocratic notions. Meritocracy cuts to the heart of who we are. It sustains the American dream. But what if both, up and down the social ladder, meritocracy is a sham? Today, meritocracy has become exactly what it was conceived to resist: a mechanism for the concentration and dynastic transmission of wealth and privilege across generations. Upward mobility has become a fantasy, and the embattled middle classes are now more likely to sink into the working poor than to rise into the professional elite. At the same time, meritocracy now ensnares even those who manage to claw their way to the top, requiring rich adults to work with crushing intensity, exploiting their expensive educations in order to extract a return. All this is not the result of deviations or retreats from meritocracy, but rather stems directly from meritocracy's successes. Really interesting concept to reframe meritocracy, which it kind of felt like for many years, that's the one thing we could all agree on. Whether you're Republican or Democrat, you live in America, if you pull yourself up by your bootstraps, the system of capitalism and the meritocracy of being able to work hard. If you just work hard enough, you can move your way up from lower middle class or middle class up into a higher caste. You can move yourself up. And that may have been true in America at one point in time. But increasingly, that is becoming more and more an aberration, or I guess you'd say less and less of a possibility for more and more of the middle class. In fact, the way that meritocracy is being managed right now by the elites that run these higher education institutions, our universities in America, they're being run to favor the people that are already in a high caste, favor the elite, the top 1% that can afford to give their kids super amazing advantages throughout their childhood to prepare them to go into the elite universities to become the next elites. So, I just want to share a few concepts from this book with you before I kind of share some of my opinions. The case made by Daniel in this book is that the American meritocracy of today is a replacement for the aristocracy of the pre-colonial days. Okay, so kind of getting to this concept of there was a time in world history before America, before we had the Declaration of Independence and our Constitution and we became America, and there was the British government. They had the aristocracy over in Europe. And the aristocracy was like the leisure class. They didn't work. They just had a lot of family wealth. In fact, it was generation after generation of people that were prepared to not work. Like that was the whole idea was you live in such a privileged caste of people that you just have a lot of money, that's family money, and you don't work. That's the whole point. But when the settlers came over to America, they did not bring the concept of the aristocracy with them. And that's really something key to tune in on, because as America has developed, we don't have what you would call a pure leisure class. I'm sure some of it still exists here in America, but it's not the predominant narrative that we've built America on. Rather, we have replaced the aristocracy with this concept of a meritocracy, where we've developed what's called a working rich class of people. Another way to describe them is white-collar salt mine workers. These are people that work extremely hard, and they continue generation to generation to work harder and harder to stay in that high caste themselves. You know, I just want to point this out. This is like a side note. CNN correspondents and other liberal news correspondents, people like Chris Cuomo, they love to talk about how bad inequality and injustice are in the systems of America. Ooh, that inequality and that injustice, man. And because we're talking about it, we must be the ones that are the real champions to fight against it, right? I don't know, Chris Cuomo may not be the best champion for fighting against this concept of inequality and injustice, as he himself is in an elite caste that has benefited himself from the inequality that comes from our current American meritocratic system. But according to this book, Meritocracy Trap, if there's something that could be described as systemic in creating and driving inequality, it is actually our American universities and the caste system that props up the highest end universities in America. More and more insiders from the university environment are beginning to write books about this. They're beginning to talk about it openly. Even liberals. I mean, shoot, even Daniel Markovits is a liberal. You know, he gets into it in the first chapter, second chapter of his book. By the way, this guy, very intelligent, very well-researched book, things to back up, to cite on virtually everything he says in the book, except when it comes to Donald Trump. And this is where he shows he's just, you know, ultimately, even with the boldness to stand up to the liberal hegemony, the liberal machine that has made him successful, even with all that, at the end of the day, he'll drop something in his book about Donald Trump like the darkness that Donald Trump has ushered in, or, you know, what an evil, bad, da-da-da-da-da. You know, Donald Trump's such an evil, bad guy. I'm like, really? This guy's so intelligent, so well-researched. By the way, there's no data. He doesn't provide you with any proof that Donald Trump is this dark, evil guy. It's just more accusations, more ideological possession by a intellectually biased liberal. At any rate, I do want to give him credit for even writing this book. So I don't just want to put this guy down, but it is a bummer that, you know, a guy this intelligent can't see that it's actually the liberals that are ruining America. They're the ones that are pulling the levers of this meritocratic machine that he's railing against. I mean, who's in charge of our K through 12 education, our universities in America? It's the liberals. They literally have a lock on all of it. If there's going to be elitists created in America from our university systems, it's liberals creating those elites. In fact, it's the liberal elite that are actively working to create further and further divide between the middle class and lower middle class and the elites of America. They're the ones driving it. So when we want to talk about inequality, yeah, Chris Cuomo, you want to talk about inequality. Who's driving that? Who's really creating that? Liberals. Liberals are driving the inequality in America. Is that just? They control every aspect of every part of education at every minute level. At the same time, they screech about inequality and injustice. This is liberals' way. They prop up, through their caste system they have created, to favor the top 1% of wealthy Americans. These are the top schools where elites are allowed to send their kids. And then there's the other colleges in America that are in essence, the booby prize for the other 99% of Americans. Of course, they'll find jobs in middle-class locations around our country, but they're not going to get the elite jobs. They're not going to be invited into that caste. They will not have the pedigree. In fact, it's the systems that the liberals have created in the universities and then the post-university that have created the jobs for these people, where they continue to tailor the job to the applicant coming out of the elite university. They continue to make it harder and harder to get into that group. You know, one of the examples that Daniel Markovits makes in his book is this concept of banking. There used to be a time here in America, years ago, where there was a strong, when we had a stronger middle class on the whole, and this middle class, when it came to banking, the person that was creating out your loan documentation, that person had like a regular, like good middle class job. And over time, what the liberal elites have done is they've created a banking system so that more and more of the elites make more money for doing more of the elite work when it comes to doing things like analysis around the loans. So they've further and further commoditized what the loan officer does. That used to be a good middle class job is now a grunt job, where it's the person just kind of going through the computer and helping the person fill out a form real quick, and then that goes to some elite, where there's less of those people working much harder, longer hours, making a lot more money, and keeping the middle class now down at the working poor level. And this is happening in many, many career tracks throughout America. All these sort of white collar jobs that are now getting, the wealth is getting consolidated in a smaller number of liberal elites that are running everything. You know, and they want to screech and complain about inequality and injustice. And ultimately, the minorities that liberals claim to be fighting for. You know, the immigrants from other countries, the people from any Mexican race, black people. The liberals constantly say how they're fighting for those people. And so they use things like affirmative action to favor these people. And, you know, of course, there's that conversation when it comes to universities. There's a lot of people that are getting into these high caste universities that may not qualify otherwise, but they're being brought in through scholarships and through this, that, and the other, putting those people in there. And the point that Daniel Markovits makes, I can't even believe he made this point, but them propping up minorities, getting them into these high universities based on, in essence, the color of the skin or their ethnicity, one way or the other. Mostly they're admitting in lower performing minority kids into these universities to prop. Basically, these people are being used as props to hide how unfair and unequal their caste system is. In other words, they're using minorities to launder their own unequal schemes to favor the rich and those that already have achieved high caste. You see what they're doing? You see how nasty this is, what the liberals are really doing with their system? They're just using these minorities as pawns. And I think to a lesser extent, but they're still doing it, our middle class and our lower middle class. You need to think about this stuff. If you're a liberal and you're watching this, and you're in the middle class, you're in the lower middle class, why are you favoring that party? Why are you voting for that party? You're voting for the liberal elites to keep you down. It's all a giant game, sleight of hand. While we stare at one hand, there's another hand behind their back doing the trick, keeping everybody else out while they favor the top 1%. Young adult liberals don't even know how much they're being duped right now and how much they're being used as useful idiots. So this is the question I have. If you are a liberal and you're watching this show right now, are you a liberal chump? Are you a liberal that got a basic college education at one of the booby prize universities? Are you now one of the useful idiots rioting in the streets alongside Antifa and BLM, LARPing in the streets like you're doing something revolutionary, when really all you're doing is playing stupid games to win stupid prizes? You're a tool of a larger, cynical, liberal system that is using you as a distraction from what the elite liberals are really doing just to simply favor themselves and throw everybody else under the bus. Keeping you rioting in Portland as a diversion. Liberal elites do not care about you if you are a liberal that is of medium caste or low caste. When the revolution is complete, they will not be bailing you guys out and rescuing you. They only care about themselves and their close-knit family that they are propping up to be the next elites. You will be a serf in the serf class, serving the liberal elites coffee at Starbucks. It's funny, I mentioned this. The author of the book Meritocracy Trap, Daniel Markovits, suggests that the only way to solve this problem that basically the meritocratic system's gotten out of control. And the people that were playing that game, originally it was a good system and it really did give people basically of any background a chance to move their way up, the meritocracy within our capitalist nation. But what's happened is it's been abused. The system has been abused by liberals, in essence. He suggests that the only way to solve this problem is to encourage the elite 1% to give their wealth away and make more room for a more robust middle class. This, to me, I think it's very sweet, He's making a case that if he can lighten the workload for these people, and they have to work less hard, they'll make less money, but then we'll create a larger, stronger middle class. He thinks this is the solution. This is the path. This is where the real problem in his philosophy is. This is where his argument falls apart, because he fails to recognize that liberals are really caught up in an atheist secular religion. They worship wealth and status. These people, that's the last thing. They would rather get heart failure and die early in life than to give up their wealth and their status. That is not going to happen. It's almost like this guy has a kind of quasi sort of hippie kind of vibe going, like kumbaya our way through it. No. Liberal elites are not going to give up their elite status, and they're not going to give up their wealth. In fact, they're going to keep creating more and more inequality. Even with all of the high education, he doesn't see how pedestrian and naive his concept is. It is a joke to think that these liberal elites are going to slow down and spread their wealth out to the middle class and the lower middle class beneath them. The liberal elite that have created the system do not care about the lower middle class or the immigrants or the black Americans. Liberal elites only care about their own wealth and status, and they'll just keep gathering more of the wealth in a smaller percentage at the top. They created the caste system and have continued to widen the gap between the haves and the have-nots for the last several centuries. The name of the game for anybody in the atheist secular religion, which is the liberals' religion, is to continue to gain more power and wealth for themselves, and the rest of the world be damned. It is the liberal elite using the university system to keep their families at the top 1%, and the liberal elite from generation to generation. Is that fair? Is that just that the liberal elites are doing that? To prop up inequality and amplify it generation upon generation? If you're a liberal, does it make you angry to hear that your liberal elites are actively throwing you under the bus so that they can have more? What's the matter? I thought you guys were in this together. You liberals, you are in this together, right? The truth. Daniel Markovits, the author of this book, is looking in the wrong place for answers. And I think liberals in general, trying to correct their own problems, the answer is not going to come from other liberals. He's still sold on the answer that he thinks needs to come from the left. That somehow Democrats are going to figure this out on their own. But the truth is, real compassion and empathy for other people other than yourself is a motivation that can only truly come by humbling yourself before a loving God. Humbling yourself before Him and accepting that you don't actually have all the answers. Humanist solutions are not going to solve inequality, injustice. This is the only thing. God, having a belief in Him, in turning from your atheist secular religion, is the only thing powerful enough to truly motivate people to be selfless. You're not going to get there through worldly means. Apart from having a God-centered worldview, it's just different levels of feigning compassion for others, when in reality, you are just positioning to acquire more power and wealth for yourself. I'm not expecting that Daniel will somehow understand this. If you were to see this video, I just assume that he's sold too far down the river to switch from the atheist religion to a God-centered one. But even though Daniel may not be reached via this video, some of you that are watching this video out there just might be. All right, this has been another episode of Americana X Newswatch, coming to you straight from Hollywood, California. I'm Greg D. If you haven't yet, like, comment, subscribe, share this video with people in your network so we can promote a greater America. And I will see you next time.